Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Renaissance Room podcast. In today's episode, I'm recording this on January 5th of 2026, which is so crazy. Happy New Year to everyone. You guys know what it is, documenting culture, sharing insights from reading and writing and sharing my thoughts and building community. So, we're going into a new year and I'm excited. I'm excited to continue to talk to you guys and, do my thing here on the pod. So this is great. We'll go ahead and get into the episode. All right. Now, today's episode, I want to talk about something. Okay. And I'm kind of tiptoeing here because I'm really going to just get straight to the point, right, of conversation. This podcast is going to contain some language. And I think a lot of my podcasts recently have actually been containing some language that's not respectable. It's not like respectability politics. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking about race in today's episode. I'm talking about relational dynamics between Black men and Black women. But and it's not going to be, coming from, either side, right? I'm in the middle here on this one. And the reason why I'm giving this kind of bit of a disclaimer is because I think as I've gotten older and I've just lived life, and being more grounded in reality, right? It's not about being cynical. I think that's why a lot of people stay in a perpetual state of adolescence because they think that being an adult means being cynical, right? Every time an adult is depicted in the movie, it's the adult who's like didn't get their dream career, or I'm sorry, not their dream career, but their dream to come true of like being famous of some sorts, and they're like crushing the kids' dreams, right? And that's how adulthood is depicted. Right. So a lot of people avoid adulthood by staying in a perpetual state of adolescence. Right. You have people who revert back. And there was actually this scene in Sex in the City. Right. Where there's this married couple. And I don't know what was the context of the scene in terms of like, was it just them getting people's advice? But there was a woman who said, what are you going to do? If you don't get married, like, what are you going to do? You're just going to revert back to adolescence, right? And you see that today, right? And this is not coming from a place of judgment. It's just mere observation, right? I'm just sharing what I've seen, And the reason why I don't judge people for being in that state of perpetual adolescence, because it's just the truth, right? There's really nothing else to do if you don't kind of acquire certain responsibilities, if you don't have like being grounded in family and things like that. Again, not judgment. There's a lot of factors that go into play here. All right. This is not me being insensitive. I'm just speaking. Right. And sometimes I know when we are kind of speaking the truth or, being realistic in a sense, sometimes it can sound definitive. Sometimes it can sound judgmental. But that's not where I'm coming from, right? Language is one of those things to where it takes a while to kind of get it right, to be able to package things in such a way that, you can convey your point without offending anybody. But I also understand that we are living in a day and time where a lot of people are just very sensitive in regards to certain truths, right? Because some people don't have a choice. Right. And when you don't have choices, we don't have options, certain realities that may be inevitable for you, which I don't think are for many. And we're going to get into that. You're not really going to hear what I'm saying. You're going to just be offended by what it is that I'm saying. And you're going to be reactive. Right. So I absolutely think that's what happens, right? You kind of just continue to immerse yourself in bar culture, dating culture, club scenes, things like that. But the people are younger, right? The people are younger now. That's why you have women coming online saying like, there was this video I saw of this woman, and I'm not going to say women, I'm going to say a woman, right? Because there's only one video I saw, but there were quite a few comments, right? A woman was saying how, the YNs, right? Which y'all know I was kind of like, whoa, that's what we're doing now? That's crazy. But she was basically saying that they love older women. She was like, yeah, I went out last night and I just had a good time. And, hey, no judgment, not saying anything about that content creator. But I'm more so saying how, you get older, right? And if you don't necessarily have certain responsibilities, you don't have certain structure, you will revert back to adolescence, right? And you're going to find yourself immersed with younger generations and their terminology and their behaviors and their hairstyles and, the clothing and all the things, which I will actually say this. I don't judge people for dressing a certain type of way, right? I don't judge people. Like I said, this is not a podcast about judgment. I don't judge people for dressing a certain way, because what I realized is, like, once you reach a certain age, right? It's like Banana Republic, right? Because, when you're young, it's Forever 21. You know what I mean? But then you reach like 27, it's Express, it's, and I'm just naming some common stores, right? Obviously, this is for real life, right? I'm not talking about people who can buy a Mary, okay? And obviously, graphic tees and streetwear, even with some of the more luxurious designer brands, are becoming more common. But typically, even if you look at it, like, what is an adult, right? You look at those books that they have for children, and it's like the child, the teenager, the adult. There is a different style of dressing. And I do think that for a lot of people, I do think monetary value plays a role in terms of how people dress, right? If something that's, trendy is accessible to you and it's affordable, then that's likely what people are going to wear. So, not everybody can afford Banana Republic. And even if you do try to find, quote unquote, like a dupe, it may not look like that, right? So this is not about policing people in their expression. I'm just more so saying, affordable fashions oftentimes do favor a younger generation, right? Younger people. And I think, that's probably one of the grievances. And we're going to be talking about that too, right? Like in regards to economics, right? And you start talking about Black people and wages and all the things. So first off, I want to start off by saying, what happens when you're an average Black person, right? When you're an average Black person, when there's really nothing extraordinary about you, right? You can feel pushed to the side. You can feel overlooked. And quite frankly, by and large, right, you are considered unworthy, right? I think we sometimes forget that, or I don't want to say forget, I just don't think we take into consideration a lot of times what was birthed by our ancestors. You're talking about a different time, right? You're talking about people who were in bondage, right? You're talking about people who were given nothing when they were freed from bondage, right? So much of the hard work and the tenacity that we have, it's not this inherent thing that's solely relegated to Black people, right? And what I mean by that is, like, you have this thing of Black excellence, and you start to question, what is Black excellence? Is there, people kind of spiritualize it. You start to think, okay, maybe we're just born different. Maybe we carry a different type of blah, blah, blah. And no, what it is being ordinary, right? Average persons who are born into a world that says you need to be extraordinary to matter here. And that's not a white supremacist standard. That's oftentimes a Black standard, right? It's called Black excellence. Our standards for living, for existing, for being are so incredibly high, right? And we all pay a price for that. I think about just, when you hear these conversations about, I want a rich man, et cetera, et cetera. It's not really about, it's not solely about monetary value, right? It's really about optics. You see what I'm saying? So many of us are so far away from Black excellence. We are so far removed from that, right? And for all the same reasons that, the societal, the environmental, right, the cultural, the economic reasons why certain Black men aren't going to have certain positions, right? It's the same for Black women. Like, I know we get online and I don't know if these women are buying dupes. I don't know if they're at Airbnbs. I don't know what it is. But not every woman is going to arrive at Black girl luxury, right? We're all not going to have Benzes. You see what I'm saying? And it's like, when you push that as the narrative of being, you have a bunch of people who are so competitive, right? Who mistreat one another, right? And you have a bunch of people communally, culturally, right, who see one another as unworthy. So the conversations about getting a rich man or dating somebody of a certain type of status, it's not about the money, right? It's about being socially acceptable. It's about being validated by society in large. It's about optics. Right? It's about being able to say, I married this person, right? That's what it's about. And the dangers of that is, like I said, you have a bunch of average persons. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I think for average people, I think that you need to strive to have community. I think you need to strive to have a family. Okay. And that's just me personally. And the reason why I say that is because you don't get the luxury of being in existing in the world with resources that are going to grant you options. Right. And I'm not talking about dating options. I'm talking about the option to pursue higher education. Like, I know a lot of times we look at people and they're like, oh, they got an MBA, they got an MS. Do you know what it takes to like be on that path? Right. Because for so many people, right, you're a lot more successful. It starts off earlier if you're able to go straight through college. But for so many of us, that is not the case. Okay. That is not the case. And for a myriad of reasons. Okay. And so I just think that even at the most basic average level, we rid ourselves from celebrities, right? We rid ourselves from influencers. At the most basic average level, that standard of living has something to do with education in the workforce, right? And there's not a lot of options there. And depending on your support system, your options are even fewer, right? Community, relationships, right? Love, that used to be something that was available to everybody. But now we're doing this thing where we're kind of like moving the marker and we're saying, hey, listen, y'all don't get this either. And that has such a detrimental impact on us on a communal level, right? And it's really big because most of us are still there in that space, right? People who we see online, they are the exception. Right. And most people are not telling you their story because it's not anything that people care about. People don't really, some people are sharing their stories, right? But for a lot of people, who have lived their lives and who have made certain choices, who have been granted certain choices, who have been given certain resources. One thing I learned about such persons of privilege, right? And I'm not talking about, it doesn't have to be anything grand. It doesn't have to be life insurance. It doesn't have to be any of that. It just, and sometimes it's not privilege, right? Sometimes it's choices, but certain people who have either had choices or privilege, right? Who have made better choices, who have had better options to make better choices, right? They don't even realize their privilege, right? And so by and large, they're coming out and they're not telling you the support that they had, because that's the thing about being the person in the background, right? And that's the thing about being somebody who has been heavily supported in your life. You don't actually realize how many people and systems and structures and resources that you have that have buffered you up, right? That have buffered you, that have been your safety net to get you to where you are. And I know you're like, yes, they do. No, they don't. No, they don't. There's people who I know who have husbands who are not necessarily wealthy, but he's a hardworking man, right? And this person or these persons, right, they're able to live a certain type of life where they have a little bit more comfort than the single mom, right? And they don't realize that. Why? Well, in part, they might be online listening to a bunch of women complain or talk negatively about men, right? Or the other aspect is just they are so privileged, they don't even realize that if they didn't have their husband, their life will look completely different, right? All that dilly-dally, you ain't gonna have no dilly-dally, but you can't appreciate it and you can't recognize it because your husband's doing DoorDash on the side. You know what I mean? You can't appreciate it because it's like you may not have the certain things that you want. And it's not, by society's definition, the most, prestigious thing, right? You maybe chose wrong. Your husband's in the workforce. Like, you know what I mean? You can't appreciate it. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I know this is not going to land well for a lot of people, but if we're talking about Black excellence and we're talking about the things that breed Black excellence, right? Things being circumstances, right? Because again, that's why our ancestors were as successful as they were, coming from very, very hard circumstances. That's how they were able to do the impossible because they had no choice but to do the impossible. For so many of us today, right? We are a little bit ahead of the curve. We're in a different space now, right? People are still going out and doing great things with limited resources. I think that's, the reality for many of us by and large. But it doesn't look the same, right? But at the same time, right, the undertone, right, the undercurrent, that the ongoing theme is still the same. And you're expected to be this person that does something extraordinary in the world to matter, And so, I just don't think people realize that. And so I don't know. I don't want to say something corny and be like, joy is one of those things that's found in the little things, but I just think that you have to really be in touch with your values. It's really unfortunate today. I think one of the things that just really grieves me, I think, when I think about, it's me, y'all, I'm rambling. I'm sorry, because I'm trying to think about what I want to say without being too, when I think about women and I think about just, Black women's sexuality and Black women relationally, right? I don't think that anybody gets more flack from partnering with a man like Black women. Like white women are kind of on this wave now too. Like, you know what I mean? Where they're kind of like, kind of doing that thing where they get online and it's like, oh, men are gross or whatever. And it's not to say it's just Black women, but I do think by and large, white women are still partnering and they're still, having their relationships. And I think economics don't always matter, right? And I think the reason being is because it's socially and communally acceptable for them to partner with their men. But for Black women, it's not. You see what I'm saying? It's not. Like, I'm going to be honest with you, when Black women are loved by Black men and they find partners, all that, commenting on women's marriages and commenting on women's relationships with Black men, like, oh, he's going to ruin your life or whatever. All that goes out the window, right? These women are like cute little puppies. Okay. Cute little puppies, soft girls, no Birkin intended. You know what I mean? No Birkin has no material value added, right? Just by default, these are women. Right. And so it really is heartbreaking, I think, to see so many content creators and see so many people with such influence push such hateful messages when the reality is that all that will be cured if they had a certain type of partner. I think another thing that I've realized in regards to the Black community is that Black women, by and large, are encouraged to leave their partners. It doesn't matter if he's white. Like Black women are expected to be they are the epitome of Black excellence, right? Like Black women are expected, even when they don't have to, right, to forego community, to forego relationships, and maybe colorism plays a role, but Black women are expected by and large to do it by themselves, to do it very well, right, and to defy the odds and to continuously endure ongoing struggle and rise from it. Do you see what I'm saying? That is our validation for womanhood. And that's not to compare and say, oh, well, womanhood is about marriage. And no, I'm just telling you, the definition and the expectation for Black women in womanhood, right? I don't think that there's any other race of women that are encouraged to do the crazy stuff that we are encouraged to do. Like I've seen some crazy content. And again, we know things could be rage bait, all that. I'm not saying that, and I'm not necessarily hitting on every nuance because this podcast will be like 3 hours long, probably even 5 hours if I hit on every single nuance. So I just need you to kind of get the vibe. You know what I mean? But like, it's crazy to me. And then the crazy thing is, when Black women do remove themselves from their marriages or, quit their jobs or whatever the case may be, there is absolutely no one there to be that buffer or that safety net, right? All the people who, and this is the thing about Black people, right? We have this thing where it's like, we will walk you to the ledge, right? Encourage you to jump. And then once you jump, it's like, oh, okay. Oh, well, on to the next thing, right? On to that's communal harm. Like, that's the problem. You know what I mean? That's the problem. How many people, and I guess from a relational standpoint, right, just simply put, how many Black women have been encouraged to leave their partners, leave their, all these different things. You know what I mean? And for what? And then you look up and certain things are irreversible. You know what I mean? And then it's a thing of like, you'll find somebody else, when it's like you already had somebody, I don't know. I know one thing's for sure. You can't talk to women and specifically Black women, especially, I'm going to say any women. Actually, I'm going to say all women today about relationships, and I know that being online, like, it's so not real. Being online is not a real place. It's when you go online, like you are somebody, even if you are sitting and you have nothing, right? You have nothing, like in terms of admirability. Like nothing's admirable. You know what I mean? Like you're just a regular, average, everyday person. But when you get online, you are somebody. I don't give a crap if you have 20 followers. You are somebody. In your mind, you can go online. It's ego, it's arrogance, it's whoever you say you are. That's who you are. It's proxy, it's parasocial relationships, and it's straight up delusion. It's straight up delusion. So I think so much of the grievances that I think many Black women feel is because of the societal pressure that encourages them to put themselves in difficult situations, right? And like I said, it's not just relationally, but I feel like I have to balance relationally with like job opportunities and employment and entrepreneurial endeavors, because I just think it's such a sensitive thing to say or to talk about. But yeah, and it's just sad. I think about, how anytime you even think about a man, we automatically villainize them, right? Like we villainize men. And I don't want to say we, like Black women, but I'm just saying women in large, and I don't know and I think it's always kind of been that fear there, but I think the fear has been amplified. I don't know if it's just because of social media stories or, if it's because a lot of people aren't dating. And that's what I always think sometimes, like people don't have experience, so people kind of get fear of what they don't know how to engage with, which is the opposite sex, right? We're out of the workforce. People are working from home. So like, I don't know where it comes from, but I just think that it's a very interesting thing. And I think the saddest part about it is like the byproduct is that you have a bunch of angry people coming online, women included, and they're like, continuously in relational spaces, right? Relational podcasts, relational things. And they're arguing with people and they're like, bashing men and all these things. And it's coming off as some truth because it resonates with a lot of women, right? A lot of women have been hurt and been burned and been used and abused, right? But at the same time, it's like, this is also someone who's in a perpetual state of grief, right? And instead of processing that grief, instead of healing that grief, instead of moving beyond that grief, or maybe even pivoting, right, to content that pulls this person away from that grief, they stay stuck. And I think the reason why people stay stuck in those spaces is because they know that maybe the choice that they made wasn't the best choice for them, right? And so then they get welcomed in community and it's like, your relationship didn't work out or whatever. Now you're in this space with the rest of us who have also made these choices or who have also, found ourselves in this space. And now you have this sense of community, but it's not real, because really everybody's hurting, everybody's in need of healing, and everybody actually wants something different for themselves, so it's unfortunate. I think, then you have the opposite side of that. You have some people who feel women who want partnerships. And I don't want to say people who feel, I meant to say women who want partnerships, but by and large, they're very unhealthy, very unhealthy. So they think, they enter in relationships and it's like, it's about being the sacrificial lamb, and it's this performative kind of like domesticity of like, I'll cook, I'll clean, I'll do all these things, and it's just not authentic. And I think it's really sad. I think you just have a lot of broken people. And, I know we don't like to talk about, our upbringings and, we don't like to talk about childhood and stuff like that and who were our role models, if there was any, but this type of stuff plays a huge role. And I guess I feel the need to address it because I think it's getting to a point where I think we're letting the lie run so long, what I mean, that it's really starting to impact a lot of people, and not just in a small way, but like by and large, what I mean? And it's getting kind of scary, it's getting kind of scary. So, it may be not even scary. I just think it's sad to see, I think it's sad to see. So I don't know. I don't know what the conclusion is. I guess all in all, I don't wanted to shine a light on, what's really taking place, when we don't have certain aspirations and we're not, excelling in Black excellence and we're not, doing all these things, right? Not because we don't have the ability, but maybe because we just didn't have that type of conditioning where we came from nothing, you know what I mean? Like maybe we had a little bit of something, or maybe we have other values, other priorities in our lives, right? Maybe, you have done all the things and you start to realize that systemic racism is real. Okay. It is caused systemic racism. Okay, there's institutional racism. And you start to realize that what seemed so promising was not promised to you specifically. It was more of a, topsy-turvy kind of thing. Or maybe you're in these spaces, right? There's a lot of Black women who are in these spaces where they do have these things, and they come out and they start to say things like, well, working this job, I realized like corporate this, corporate that, or you have all these complaints about corporate. And again, I'm just here being realistic, right? At the end of the day, we all got to work. It is going to be what it is, right? I always tell people, like, I was always against the belief that you should bring your full self to work. I think that's silly, right? I think that's a new age thing. All right. You don't enter into a space. I don't care who you are. Okay. I don't know if that's entitlement. I don't know if that is, feeling like, being hyped up on Black excellence to where you think the rules don't apply to you. I don't know. But I don't think you should ever enter into a work environment and a professional environment expecting to, show up a different way, right? There's a code of standard. There's a code of behavior. It is what it is, and again, only Black people are expected to rewrite the rules, to change the standard, to be the one who has to be the revolutionary. And look at what it cost us, y'all. Right. So like, I know this podcast has kind of been all over the place, but if I had to say, hey, this was my entire point is look at what Black excellence has cost us relationally. Right. Like, because now you're showing up in the workplace doing all that. And guess what? Now you don't have a job. Now you're unemployed. And now you're talking about, all these things when it's like, yeah, maybe it could have been, racism. But at the same time, you was up in that job acting crazy. You was up in there just doing too much. And now you're online and you're joining the narrative of people who are talking about things who it may be social injustice, but that might not be the case for you. And so my point is, I think the saddest thing is that you can always find a community for your mistakes and to express your grievances, right? There's always some community by and large, right? I think these are the biggest communities, right? Who are there to help you and guide you and, or not even guide you, really, just to hold your emotions, hold your grievances, you know what I mean? But there's just not enough people that are just like, hey, this is the mistake I made. This is how I grew, and so I don't know. I guess I'm just coming on to say, because I feel like right now, we are living in a day and age where a lot of people are feeling defensive about certain choices. And I think for me, I'm coming from a space of maybe, again, just being insightful, right? I'm not here to tell anybody what to do or how to live their lives. I just think, it's a lot we don't know. I think there's a lot we don't know. And I feel like if I learned something, and I applied it to my life, it's tried and true. I just want to come on and share it, especially when I see certain lies and certain things just sweeping, and a lot of people adopting certain paradigms, right? Like, I just want to come on and share like, hey, listen, this ain't the way, or this is why this is happening, So, yeah, I don't know. I think that a lot of it is just, life is so ordinary, y'all. I'm just being real. Like it is such an ordinary life. And, I can't tell you how to live it, but I do think you need wisdom on how to live a good life because, the American dream is just that. It's a dream. It's in the clouds. It's in our imaginations. You know what I mean? When you start talking about the work that it takes to achieve certain things, right? To get a master's degree. Like, do you understand how much schooling that is? You know what I mean? You have to pass your classes. Like, you have to be up to academic standard. You know what I mean? In terms, you get financial aid, you may run out of aid, right? Like, there's a lot that goes into the things that we aspire. And I'm not saying you shouldn't aspire to have them, right? I'm just more so saying we got to start seeing one another for who we are. And we got to start being able to acknowledge that, hey, greatness is not just the person with the platform. Greatness is not just the person who, it looks like they have all the things together. It's not just a celebrity. You know what I mean? Like, you're listening to me, I'm an average person. And a lot of people like this podcast. A lot of people like the wisdom that I have. You know what I mean? Now, granted, I think I look pretty good. I think, you know what I mean? I'm fashionable. I'm all these things. I don't think that I'm overlooked by and large in society. I'm a beautiful woman, but at the same time, I'm just an average girl, so it's like, my way of living and being, it's not glamorous. It's nothing flashy. You know what I mean? Like if it was coming down to me or the celebrity or whatever, that person who has all the things is going to be the person people listen to, even if they don't even have an iota of wisdom. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people right now, regardless of what you want to say, right, or regardless of any rebuttal, a lot of people right now are trying to figure out what best choice can I make? What are some choices I can make? And I think the reality is that, you have people who come online and they're giving advice and they're not being honest about some of the choices that they have made. Much of what you do as an African American person is not going to be approved by society at large. Okay, that's just period. All right, that's just period. Okay. And it's important for you to know that so you can start making choices and living your life accordingly, right? And that's my whole thing about women in relationships and so forth, right? Men as well, And the reason why I say that is because it's like life is going to go on, and this is your real life. And you're going to pay a price for the choices that you make. You know what I mean? Everything costs, right? And I know people are like, well, this is hard. This is hard. Yes, but some things are hard, but like you get to choose your hard, and like, in some things that you choose, it's hard, but it's like, okay, this is sustainable, right? This is also nurturing. This also gives back. Some things is like, it doesn't, or some things it's like, and I think that's the thing, you talk about people who grew up and there's this material lack, men and women. And, it gets to a point where I think for them, even the hoarding of the money, the excessive spending, like all that, like, I don't know if that's really enough. If you ask me, is it fun in the moment? Yes. Is it fabulous? Is it nice to flaunt and to have and to, like, sure. I'm absolutely sure that it is, but at the same time, I'm just, hey, like, listen to your values. What do you value? Because if you value, other things, everybody don't value money. Everybody don't value, and it ain't about money. Like, so you can value stability without valuing money and valuing luxury and valuing, like, you know what I mean? Like, without being materialistic, you can like fashion without being like consumptuous or gluttonous or spending all your money, going in debt for these things. So it's like, it's all about your values. And I guess I'm just here to say for the average everyday person, you need to assess your values. If you're on social media, you need to do it fast. Okay. Because very quickly you're going to get filled with all these ideas and beliefs about the world, and it's going to start to shape how you see the world, and you're going to start making choices that only are going to cost you at the end of the day. It's not going to cost this influencer. It's not going to cost that influencer, So anyway, I can't tell you what to do. All right. I don't care to tell you what to do. It's your life. You live it. I'm going to live mine. Right. But what I am going to say is that you can have a good life and it could be an average life. And it doesn't mean that you don't work hard and you don't strive, but it does mean that you are aware that nothing is guaranteed, right? And it does mean that you are someone who values other things and you don't base your worth in what it is that you can attain, and you don't make choices based off of, society's validation of you, right? Because it's for a Black person, it's going to be a very high price you're going to pay to have that level of admiration, right? If you're famous and you're rich, they don't want you to talk about politics. If you talk about politics, you have some money, they call you a capitalist. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what to tell you. You get somebody with some money and it's highly prized and he's cheating on you, they tell you this. You get somebody who's, working or whatever, they tell you that. You know what I mean? You get the girl who is dressed like this or moves like that or whatever, and it may not coincide with your values, and then it's this, right? You get the girl who doesn't look like that, doesn't dress like that, it coincides with your values, they tell you that. You know what I mean? So I guess as we move into 2026, I just want to say, what I think a quiet life is a good life. And I think you can have a sense of worth and peace when you surround yourself with people who really value you, people who are into what you're into, people who support you, for you and not for what you can produce and not for what it is that you're, trying to build or create or aspire to have, right? Because again, it's just not, we don't know. For every influencer that blew up, for every person who made it, there are so many people who did not make it. And I know all you have is your phone and all you have is a few people around you, but like, people are in the world, like that's just something we can't fathom. You can't fathom all the people who didn't make it, and you also can't fathom, certain choices people have made, and the consequences of those choices as they get older, as they age, as they, because it's one of those things where it's like, you don't pay the price in real time. It's over time, and it like interest accrues, you know what I mean? So I can't tell you what to do. I'm not here to tell you what to do. But I do think it's important that you start to kind of realize like what's really going on under the guise of your favorite content creators who have like thousands of followers. You know what I mean? You also have to be very careful today too. Like there's a lot of people who are doing, content that's like academic based or informational based, and really they're just kind of milking the common narrative, right? So they may not be educating you, right? There may not be anything about it other than the fact that it's spectacle, it's entertaining, right? But you got to be careful because it's under the guise of academia, right? I think there is a reason why we have classrooms for people who love to learn and think, right? It's a safe space, it's a safe space to express ideas, right? And within the confinement of a classroom, within an instructor who can regulate, right? Like it's a safe space to explore ideas. Online, I actually don't think it's a safe space, right? There is no container, right? There is no space for that. So a lot of people who do this work of like, I'm educating people or whatever, or I have a platform and I'm talking about men, or I have a platform and I'm talking about women or society or Black culture or whatever, a lot of times it's whatever is the most popular, right? It's entertainment, but they're doing it under the guise of academia, a couple buzzwords, capitalist this, patriarchy that, and it's like, oh yeah, they know what they're talking about, so you have to be very careful of that today because, these things, it shapes how you see the world. And I think your perception is the most important thing, because that's the thing you're going to live with. You can have standards and have all the things and be somebody who's well respected and not necessarily have a partner who is rich or well accomplished. That doesn't mean you don't have standards, and celebrities are not your friends, right? We don't know them. We don't know these people. We don't know their relationship. Like, I think for some of us, I think most people are good, right? But for some of us who live our lives in such an authentic way, you can't imagine this person, that you're looking up to, this rapper or whatever, being somebody completely different, right? You can't imagine how this person is just coming on, putting on a show and saying these things that aren't true, living their life in a way that is, to the public, right? In such a way that it does not reflect their real life, and we call it disingenuous, but it's like it is an actor, it's an entertainer. There's a lot of people who are putting this image together, from the stylists to the writers. Okay. Like that's again, you just can't fathom it. So you have a lot of people who are, judging other people and making certain, opinions based on people. And it's like, you have no idea. This person has like a public persona, and it's carefully curated by a multitude of other artists. You know what I mean? Like style, like everything. You see these people without all that. They're just everyday average people. And they too are worthy of love. So, people who date within their industries, that's their business. But you need to worry about your business. You need to be figuring out like, okay, how am I going to make this life a good life for me? Well, where I'm at, where I want to go, and considering the fact that there are going to be some things in my life that I'm aspiring to have that are just not going to be guaranteed. Not because I have a baby, okay? Not because I'm married, not because I, whatever, but because that's just life. That's just life. And if it works out, great. You'll have your sense of values. You'll have your authenticity intact, and you'll be able to stand on that foundation. But I can guarantee, as you get older, you probably aren't going to want the things that society is telling you to want right now anyway. You're probably not. I always think about it from a financial standpoint when I look at people and like their spending, and I'm like, how are you affording this? Those influencers who like share with us like how much they make and everything. It's like, how are you not how much they make, but the things that they buy. I'm just like, how is this sustainable for the next 7 years? Like, how are you going to be able to afford this in the next how many years? I don't know. Those are the things I think about. Like, okay, you're going to buy it outright. Like, okay, but then what about this? What about that? And then it's like, it's a sad thing, I think, for a lot of young people who, reach a certain level of success at such a young age, right? Or people in general, who are amongst average people who are very successful, right? It's because it's like, all you do is attract users, right? So there's the other aspect, because most people around you don't have that level, of wealth to be able to equate that. There was this young influencer, she bought a house, and I'm not here to talk about women in a bad way, but, she said something that stuck with me. Well, stuck with me, but struck me rather, or made me raise the brow. And she was like, I'm hoping my husband comes, and she's faith-based, and God bless her. Hopefully that happens for her. But it's like, man, you got to be careful now, because it's like you might attract somebody who just, so I don't know. I just think, people are doing the best they can. Like I said, I'm not here to judge anybody. I know I'm back and forth in between my words. These are conversations I really don't like to have, but I just think, like I said, this content has like really run amok. And I just feel like in the new year, it's just getting to the point where it's like, be authentic. Do you go back to the drawing board and like figure out who you want to be, because it's just getting to the point where it's like, you're going to get older and all this stuff is going to fade. And you are going to find yourself in a space of regression if you're not growing and you're not pressing forward. There's so much there's so much worth in the intangibles. So much of the intangibles are the things that like define your life, like your mindset, you know what I mean? Like the choices that you make, like that stuff is real, based on what at the time, and instead of like making your choices, making mistakes, learning, and being able to counteract some of these social media narratives, like you don't have that because you're too afraid to live and you're feeling like you got to be perfect and you're feeling like it has to look like this. And it's like, man, so I don't know. I think it saddens me to see so many people kind of like riding a wave, and just thinking the same and, really having a lot of hurt and insecurity and being angry, and masking it as like a universal, a collective truth, and I think there's a lot of, space that I hold for people in their grievances, especially, relationally. So this is not a podcast about judgment. I am not here to judge anybody. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I think I've made myself very clear. I don't know what I'm going to call this one. This one's a relatively long one, but I'm glad because that means that, may have fewer listeners, fewer need to kind of dramatize what it is that I've said. So I hope you guys got something from this piece.